Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm asking a very simple question. Is Monkey Shoulder the most accessible Scotch whisky? Yes, indeed. If you've not tried it, you've definitely seen it. Monkey Shoulder, it's a Scotch blend, which is a bit frowned upon in, I guess, serious whisky circles, at least some of them. But it is allegedly, according to quite a few people, the most accessible Scotch whisky. Now, what do I mean by accessible? Well, I mean a couple of things. Firstly, flavour. It's not, and I've only ever tried it in a cocktail actually, so I can't tell you for sure, but I will tell you by the end of this review. But allegedly, it's not got the big, heavy-hitting, deep, smoky, peaty notes that you get from some more, what shall we say, hard-hitting single malts. Not at all. This is a blend, and allegedly it's a bit sweet, a little bit caramelly, and of course the other part about being accessible is both the availability and the price. This is available pretty much in every supermarket in the UK now and much further afield. It's also not horrifically expensive. Sets you back about the same as a bottle of Jack Daniels does, which of course in whiskey terms is really not that much. One interesting thing to point out though is on the Shoulder Monkey website and in a lot of their general literary material, they point out that this is designed for mixing. So this is not meant to be drank on its own, which is interesting, but we'll give it a go anyway. And as I pointed out earlier, this is a blend, not a single malt, and we'll take a look at the origins of this earlier and which single malts actually went into producing this. So, but firstly, let's give it a go. So, before I break into it, here is a quick look at the bottle. Pretty iconic at this point. You can see the three monkeys on the shoulder. It is a standard 40% ABV blend, and yeah, batch 27, which also has some significance, which I think we'll read more about later as well. So let's get into it. The initial smell is quite sweet, I have to say. In the glass then, it's got a nice golden colour. It has got some legs on it, but maybe not the most impressive. And it's got some good clarity on it, as you would expect. Right then, let's get into the aromas. It is unmistakably Scotch, which it should be, but when everyone was talking about how sweet it was and how it's made for mixing and all that, you kind of think, well, this is actually going to come across more of a liqueur or something, just not really Scotch whisky. No, it has got undeniable Scotch presence, but it's calm, it's subtle, it's refined. Individual notes, really. The alcohol does come through fairly heavy, and there's a sweetness, a toastiness, but also a soft fruity vibe, a bit of raisin in there, a bit of tiny hint of a floral edge perhaps, and a bit of honey, syrup, fresh malts even. I do feel like this is going to be much simpler, much less intense than a lot of Scotch I've had before. But I think, purely based on the aroma, I'm probably going to enjoy it quite a lot. Let's get into it. Cheers. That is smooth. That is surprisingly smooth. It's sweet. It's very sweet. It's got a tiny bit, the tiniest bit of smokiness to it. It's really not a lot. There's just a tiny hint that blends with the alcohol content and lets you know you're still in Scotland. Only just, arguably, and I don't mean geographically, I mean stylistically, but at least in the stereotypical sense. I think there are a lot of whiskies actually probably more like this than most people realise, but it's buttery, vanilla-y, caramel. That's ever so hint of a toastiness along with it. Kind of creme brulee almost aromas. It's really got just heaps of easy drinking, slightly sweet, but still well structured and not synthetic, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel like a whiskey that's trying to be a liqueur, because it's not. It's just a very careful blend of a number of whiskies, which we'll get onto in a minute, that comes across as, well, kind of, like I said, very accessible. I think most people, if you like Bourbon or Irish whiskey, actually with this, you're going to have no issue, because those default Scotch flavours that people sometimes shy away from, and I have been guilty of that in the past, they're present, but they're not mean. They're welcoming. It's an ever so enjoyable, gradual introduction, I guess, to what this style is all about. And I have drank a few Scotch whiskies recently. I haven't reviewed any yet, and I'm really glad I started here, because I have a benchmark now. It's a very low benchmark compared to what I imagine a lot of Scotch aficionados believe to be the absolute greatest, but this is, how do I explain this? This is almost your Jack Daniel's honey to Scotch. Now, don't get me wrong, that is just pumped full of sugar. This is not that, but as a intro, it's in that kind of ballpark, and yeah, I'm really loving it. Right, let's take a look at the bottle. On the front then, Monkey Shoulder, the original blended malt Scotch whisky. It says, rooted in malt whisky history and inspired by the malt men who still turn the malting barley by hand. Monkey Shoulder is blended in small batches of Speyside's finest single malt whiskies, then married to achieve a smooth, richer taste. So, as I said before, batch 27 selected by our malt master and his signature. Distilled, matured and bottled in Scotland by William Grant and Sons, family owned since 1887, 40% vol, and on the side it says, a maltman's skill is demonstrated as he turns the malting barley by hand. Years ago, some maltmen would develop a strain injury known as monkey shoulder. Thankfully, the condition no longer exists. There you go, that's how it got its name. And on the back it says, taste, mellow vanilla with spicy hints. Yeah, absolutely. Nose, zesty orange, vanilla, honey, and spiced oak. And you'll be glad to know there's only 55 calories per 25ml serving, which is, don't know why they feel the need to give you that, but yeah, there we go. It also says, don't be a drunken monkey, drink responsibly. Absolutely. Monkeyshoulder.com, normal info. That, I have to say, as an everyday supermarket available find, is really not a bad thing to have in the cupboard. If someone's not sure but they want to try something, if you've got, you just want to introduce somebody to whiskey in general, make them feel like they've had something proper but don't scare them away, yeah, not a bad shout at all. I did say I was going to touch on the history of the blend that's in this. Now, I've done some research, I've read it a few times. 3 constant distilleries come up, but there's also a suggestion that they've changed it. So I'm going to read you a snippet that I've found online, and it says, Monkey Shoulder was once made exclusively from a mixture of 3 well-respected single malt whiskies, Balvenie, Kinevie and Glenfiddich, which I'm sure most people will have heard of. As demand grew though, the brand introduced some other whiskies into the blend, with 3 single malts still comprising the blend for each batch. The blend uses 9 casks for each single malt, hence the blend is labelled batch 27. So there's a bit of history there. I do need to review, I guess, all 3 of those to see if I can work out how much of each of those characteristics are still in this at some point, but I think that's a video for another day. Coming back to this then, I see where it's coming from with the toasted oak on the aroma. It's got a fieriness that I was just putting down to the alcohol, and as anyone who's familiar with the channel will know, I've not done a lot of whiskey reviews. I'm still learning. This is kind of just me broadening my horizons in this sphere, and I think it's very easy to write off that kind of strong ABV aroma just as kind of alcohol burn, when in fact, pay a bit of attention and there is definitely some spice, some toasty, woody notes there that I probably just ignored in favour of focusing on the slightly sweeter ones. And on the taste, it's changed a little from when we first got into it, whether that's the oxygen getting to it, whether it's acclimatization of me having drank a bit already, but it's nice, it's subtle, it's sweet, it's vanilla, slightly custardy, but slightly toasty, creme brulee thing going on. Still sticking by that, and the aftertaste actually does leave you with a little bit of, yeah, you know, the top of a creme brulee, that toasted sugar, burnt sugar thing. There's a lot of that, along with, let's be honest, a slightly numb tongue because, well, it's straight whiskey, and that's part of the charm. And that really is all I have to say about it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already subscribed, if you would be so kind, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.